KSJE Farmington. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, your community hospital with a rich heritage that dates back to before New Mexico was a state. We've been improving the health of the Four Corners since 1910. As a nonprofit hospital, San Juan Regional Medical Center is a values-driven organization. We strive to deliver on our mission to personalize health care and create vitality and enthusiasm in healing. We are here for you when you need us, offering a comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and emergency care services. .35 on KSJE. It is Monday morning, October 22nd. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin, and thank you for tuning in this morning. Special welcome to our viewers who are watching us live on the KSJE Facebook page and our YouTube channel, part of the visual radio experience here at KSJE. I want to show you the sunrise from our time-lapse camera that's on our tower here at San Juan College as we get started on another Monday. As you can see, things are clearing up just a little bit. The time change will be coming in a couple of weeks. It'll be a little bit brighter for a short period of time in the mornings, right around 7 to 8 a.m. But for now, we have a look at the sunrise, and we'll talk about the forecast also in just a moment, because we're expecting the clouds that we kind of see there in the horizon sticking around all day today. We are expecting, again, a mostly to partly cloudy day throughout the Four Corners today. Temperatures around 72 with showers off and on this morning and this afternoon. More showers overnight, possibly, for the low of 49. Cooler tomorrow, though, with rain in the forecast once again. 61 for a high on Tuesday, 64 a chance of showers on Wednesday before sunshine returns for the end of the week. 64 for a high on Thursday, mid-60s again Friday and Saturday. And getting cool overnight with those clear skies. 38 for a low Thursday night, 41 on Friday, and 38 on Saturday night. Joining me now in the studio as we continue our election coverage for 2018 is New Mexico Court of Appeals candidate and a sitting judge on the Court of Appeals. Hank Bohnhoff is here. Judge Bohnhoff, welcome to KSJE. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Scott.
Thanks for coming in. And you are running. You're already on the court, but you need to run in this election this November to retain your seat on the Court of Appeals.
Correct. I was appointed a year and a half ago, early 2017. So I've sat on the court now for a year and a half. Under the state constitution, I now have to run in the general election, the election November 6th, coming up in order to retain the position.
I see. And so talk to us a little bit about the Court of Appeals. I imagine a lot of our listeners this morning and viewers who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube are not maybe familiar with all that the Court of Appeals has to deal with in the state of New Mexico.
Sure. Not too many people are familiar with the Court of Appeals. I call it New Mexico's stealth court.
Okay. You're like ninjas up there on the bench.
Well, not that way. But,
okay.
It's the stealth court in that not too many people know about it.
I see.
We have the state Supreme Court, that's the highest court in the state.
Right.
We have the district courts, which are the trial courts of general jurisdiction. You have district courts sitting in Aztec and Farmington.
Correct.
If a final decision is made by the district court, the losing party has the right to appeal to our court. By appeal, I mean you don't go back and retry the case. That's not what an appeal is all about. An appeal is a review of the decision to determine if there's any legal mistake that's been made by the district court.
That's what would trigger, I guess, the appeal. That is, if their belief that there was a mistake made.
That's the argument. Yes. We make that determination, and then we issue a decision whether or not the mistake was made. If a mistake is not made, then we simply affirm the decision and it stands. If a mistake was made, sometimes we will simply reverse the decision and the losing party wins. Other times, what we will do is we will send the case back to district court with an explanation of the mistake was made, and then the district court has to do it over again.
A retrial, I guess, as it were. Right?
Correct.
But you don't have the trials at the Court of Appeals.
Correct.
Is what you're saying.
Correct.
But you're looking.
We don't hear testimony.
Right.
We don't receive evidence. We don't do that at our level.
But you're looking at the legal questions, I guess, or the questions of law in that decision and how that decision was reached either by a judge or a jury from the district court case.
Exactly. The judge may have misapplied the law, may have given the jury a wrong instruction based on a misunderstanding of the law. So frequently our job is to interpret the law and then make that decision.
Got you. And so you're still getting arguments from both sides, I would imagine, though, then,
Correct.
to make those decisions. But it's just an attorney who's appearing before the Court of Appeals?
Correct.
Is how that works.
Typically, we receive briefs. Both sides file briefs making their legal arguments. On occasion, we will hold oral argument, but not frequently. And then we make the decision based upon the arguments that are set forth in the briefs, as well as our review of the record and our review of the law.
I see. My guest this morning is Court of Appeals Judge Hank Bohnhoff. He is running to keep his seat on the Court of Appeals, and it's one of those, I guess, odd things about New Mexico law that to retain your seat, you need to run an election. You have to be a politician.
Correct. Under our Constitution, you're appointed, but the appointment's good only through the next general election, so you have to run in the election, and that's what I'm doing this time.
Got you. And then from here on out, it's more of a retention type of an election for you?
Correct. The first election that a judge faces is a contested partisan election. Once the judge gets through that election, then the succeeding elections are retention elections. You don't have an opponent. You're identified as a judge on the ballot, and the question is, will you or won't you be retained? You don't have an opponent in the retention election, but you do have to get 57% of the vote in the retention election in order to stay on the bench.
Gotcha. Very good. And so with some of the cases that you are hearing on the Court of Appeals, talk to me a little bit about your background. You've been a judge for a number of years now, right?
Year and a half.
Okay. On the Court of Appeals. What about prior to?
On the Court of Appeals. No. Prior to that, I was in practice of law. I'm a New Mexico native, graduated from Manzano High School in 1974 in Albuquerque. I went to Stanford University for college and Columbia University for law school. Came back in 1982 to New Mexico. Along the way, I'd gotten married. My wife is a native of Las Cruces. We both wanted to come back to New Mexico because we love this state. I practiced law with one of the larger law firms in Albuquerque for 32 years. I also had 2 years with the New Mexico Attorney General. In the late 1980s, I was the Chief Assistant Attorney General and then the Deputy Attorney General during that time. Late 2016, there was an opening on the Court of Appeals. One of the judges retired. I applied for that position. I was at a point in my career that I wanted to be a judge. I wanted to give back something to the state because this state has been awfully good to me and my family. I went through the judicial nominating commission process. A nominating commission interviewed me along with the other applicants. I was nominated, and then from the list of nominees, the governor selected me as the person to be appointed to fill the position.
Got it. And this was a year and a half ago.
Year and a half ago.
Is what you're saying. And so I imagine, though, becoming a politician has been a bit of a maybe a little different situation that maybe you didn't foresee as you started your law career.
That's correct. I've never done this before. I'm new to the election game, and it's a big task because I have to run all over the state of New Mexico. It's a statewide position. I have much more respect today for people who are willing to stick their necks out and run for elected office than I did 12 months ago because it is a huge undertaking, and lot of work, and I don't know that people that haven't done it before really appreciate the amount of commitment that it takes.
I imagine that's true. I know we have a big state, and it takes a while to get to every corner and talk to as many voters as you try to talk to, which
That's
is what
correct.
you're doing, and that is what brings you to the northwest part of the state, and that's
Yes.
why you're here with us today. I know we can't talk necessarily about specific cases or issues, but maybe you can walk me through a little bit of what goes through your mind when you're having to make a decision about a case. How do you determine maybe which is which? I mean, I guess it's because a lot of times we think the law is black or white, but many times there are these little shades of gray that come into play, don't they?
Well, one way of looking at what I do as an appellate judge is I am solving a puzzle.
Okay.
There is a body of law that I have to look at, and there is a set of facts that I have to look at. And I have to figure out how the facts and the law fit together to form the correct picture. So in that sense, I'm solving a puzzle. Ultimately, I think there is a right answer, or at least a best answer, to any legal problem. And that's my job, is to figure out the right answer or the best answer. There are times when I have to interpret the law. The legislature passes a statute, you look at the statute, and the job I have is to figure out what did the legislature intend with that statute. It's not my job to make the law.
Right.
I do not impose my own views on what the law should be. My job is to figure out what the legislature intended and interpret the law in that manner. How do I do that? I look most closely at the words that the legislature used. The legislature chose the words that are in a statute deliberately.
Right.
And you look at those words, you use their plain, ordinary meaning, and you think about what the words mean. It sounds fairly simple, but it can be complicated if the sentence structure and the paragraph structure of the statute is not real straightforward. The other thing that you look at when you're trying to interpret a law is how is the statute, the various parts, the various sentences or sections of the statute, how are they structured, how do they interrelate? Because one part of a statute can influence the meaning of another part of the statute. But I want to look at what the legislature actually gave me in terms of the words and the structure of the statute in order to discern the intent.
Right.
I'm not going to go outside. I'm not going to look at something because once you start doing that, you start importing your own views about what the law should be. And that's simply not the job of a judge.
I see. If there's precedents, I guess, from other similar cases, can that be considered as you make your decision?
Obviously. If my court or the Supreme Court has looked at the same question, interpreted the same law before, then I don't need to reinterpret it.
I see.
That's the principle. It's a Latin term called stare decisis, but what it means is precedent controls.
I see. But I guess there's a chance, too, that could be overturned as well if there's something new, a new something that's come up, I suppose. I mean, it's happened, hasn't it?
I certainly can't overturn precedent that's established by the state Supreme Court.
By the Supreme Court.
Even if there's precedent in my court, even if I don't agree with it, we have precedent for a reason. And if courts were constantly relitigating, re-arguing, re-deciding decisions that had previously been made, we could never move forward. And the law, there would be no certainty to the law.
Right.
So the whole concept of precedent is that precedent stands, and only in very, very rare instances will a court overturn its precedent.
I see. That's why I'm not a judge, but a broadcaster. Now we know. And also, are you looking at the Constitution as well with some of your rulings, or is that more a Supreme Court?
No, I mean, if the party that brings the appeal makes an argument that the court the district court took some action, made some decision that's in conflict with a constitutional provision, whether it's the federal Constitution or the state Constitution, we certainly look at that question. That's part of our responsibility.
That's part of what you would be doing.
Sure.
And there wouldn't ever be an issue where then a decision out of your court would be bumped up to the Supreme Court. That's a different track, is it not?
That can happen.
Oh, it can.
But it's infrequent.
I see.
And to elaborate a little bit, our court hears 800 or 900 appeals every year from the district courts all around the state.
Sure.
The Supreme Court, and let me back up, a party that's unhappy with the district court has a statutory right to appeal to our court. But while a party that's unhappy with our decision may ask the state Supreme Court to review our decision, they don't have a right to have the state Supreme Court review the decision. So they have to petition the state Supreme Court, and then the court decides whether or not it wants to hear that appeal. That happens infrequently. Whereas we decide 800 or 900 cases every year, the state Supreme Court reviews only about 60 or 70 of our cases every year. So even though the state Supreme Court in theory is the final word on the law in New Mexico, as a practical matter, our court is more often than not the final word. And people just don't appreciate the role that the Court of Appeals has in shaping the law of the state of New Mexico. We do have a very significant role.
Sure. And I'm sure, again, when folks get into the voting booth, we hear a lot about the up ballot races and maybe not so much about the ones that are further down ballot, which is maybe where your race may be.
Yep.
And so that's what you're fighting, I guess, as you travel around the state and talk about the job that you do.
Sure. I mean, not only are we down ballot, but nobody knows the judges when they go to the polling place. We are a very low name ID position as compared to, say, the candidates running for governor.
Right.
And so one of the challenges of running for judicial office is to get your name out there as best you can. And obviously, if it's a statewide position, I need to go all over the state.
Sure.
And talk to people.
Well, and if it's an election, you have to raise money, and I imagine that's another thing that maybe you're not used to doing, to have to raise money for a political campaign.
Ordinarily, I would have to do that, and there are ethical restrictions on how judges can raise money. We have what's called the Code of Judicial Conduct, which is our set of ethical rules. The code says that a judge may not personally solicit a campaign contribution, and he or she cannot know if somebody has made a campaign contribution to, say, somebody on your campaign committee. So there are all these restrictions. The New Mexico legislature about 10 years ago passed a law called the Voter Action Act that solves some of the problems that are created when you require judges to run in partisan elections. Which, by the way, is not the majority arrangement in the United States. In most states, judges don't run in partisan contested elections, but we do it here in New Mexico.
Right.
What the legislature did is it provided for public financing of at least Court of Appeals and state Supreme Court races. You have to satisfy certain requirements, but once you do that, then as a candidate, you get public financing. And the quid pro quo is, if you're going to accept the public financing, you cannot take any private contributions.
I see.
I'm on public financing, so I not only do not have to raise money, but I cannot raise money.
Right. But I imagine that limits you then as to how much you can spend in
Sure.
this campaign.
Correct.
And your opponent may or may not follow the same rules.
Correct.
They have the choice.
Correct.
Well, Mr. Bohnhoff, thank you for being here. Judge Bohnhoff, I
my
appreciate
pleasure.
that. And if folks would like more information about you and your campaign, I imagine you have a website folks can go check out.
I do, and let me pull out my card.
Right.
It's www.keepjudgehankbohnhoff, excuse me, all one word, .com.
Okay.
And the important thing to remember is Bohnhoff. It's a difficult name. It's spelled B as in boy, O-H, N as in Nancy, H-O, F as in Frank, F as in Frank.
There you go.
Thank you.
And folks can find it. And again, if they're watching us here on Facebook or YouTube, they can see how your name is spelled and use that to find your website. So,
thank you.
Judge Bohnhoff, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Judge Hank Bohnhoff, my guest here on KSJE, running for the New Mexico Court of Appeals in November.